Sirens cut across the neighborhood minutes later, red lights flashing. Paramedics moved with practiced urgency, a cluster of voices and gloved hands. The investigator stepped back under the weak light of the stairwell, stomach hollow, throat tight. He could hear the recorder's faint hum still captured in his mind, the confession of a room, the sound of a shot, and then Denise's last, awful decision. The studio filled with voices, neighbors, then officers, then the distant numbing directives of people who knew how to hold disaster within a chain of procedure. Someone covered Denise with a sheet. Someone else held the envelope, like an accusation. Later, when the noise had shifted to neat boxes of evidence and the street emptied of lights and feet, the investigator sat on the curb and realized, with a stunned clarity, that his life had become a folder in a terrible case file. Out in the quiet, a pair of children would still be waiting for a mother who would never come home. The chase for truth had produced ruin instead, and the investigators and officers would sort fact for motive long after Denise's last breath was cataloged. The street was crowded when Jeremiah pulled up in his car. Red and blue lights flashed against the brick walls of the complex, painting the evening in restless color. A small crowd of neighbors huddled near the stairwell, whispering in low, anxious voices. Jeremiah frowned, heart skipping. He parked crooked, barely killed the engine, and pushed through. The closer he got, the clearer it became. Police tape stretched across the stairwell he knew by heart. Officers moved briskly up and down, their radios crackling. A paramedic wheeled an empty stretcher toward an ambulance. Jeremiah froze. His chest tightened. "What happened?" he asked a woman on the sidewalk, her arms crossed tight around herself. "Some kind of shooting," she said, shaking her head. "Happened upstairs, 3rd floor, that little studio." Jeremiah's stomach dropped. The world tilted. "My studio." He tried to push past the tape, but a uniformed officer stepped in front of him. "Sir, you can't go up there." "That's my place," Jeremiah said, his voice raw. "I live there." The officer's eyes looked over him, measuring the desperation in his face. "Name?" Jeremiah Cole. The officer stiffened, exchanged a look with another cop standing nearby. "Wait here," he ordered, then disappeared up the stairs. Jeremiah's pulse hammered. His eyes darted over the faces in the crowd, searching for Ania. No braids, no sharp smile, no familiar figure waving him down. Fear crawled up his spine. When the officer returned, his expression was grim. He didn't meet Jeremiah's eyes directly. "We'll need to ask you some questions." Jeremiah felt the ground tilt under him. His studio, his safe place, was now a crime scene. And Ania, he couldn't even bring himself to finish the thought. Inside the station, Jeremiah sat hunched in a metal chair, his palms damp against the cold surface of the table. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too harsh. He hadn't slipped, hadn't eaten. Every breath was shallow, waiting for someone to tell him what he already feared. At last, a detective slid into the chair across from him, a file tucked under one arm. His eyes were steady, but his voice carried the weight of bad news. "Jeremiah, I'm sorry to tell you this. Your roommate, Ania Johnson, was found dead at the scene." The words knocked the air out of Jeremiah's lungs. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table as if it could hold him steady. No, that's not." His voice cracked. She had class this week. She was supposed to." He pressed his forehead into his hands, trembling. The detective gave him a moment before continuing. "There was another victim as well. A woman, self-inflicted gunshot wound. Her name was Denise Brown." Jeremiah's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "Denise Brown?" The detective nodded. "Wife of Sheldon Brown. You know him? Jeremiah's heart pounded. He couldn't speak at first. He saw Sheldon's face, the pressed suits, the careful lies. He thought of Cascade Springs, of whispered promises in the steam of the shower, of how Sheldon always said Denise didn't suspect. And now, here she was, dead. Ania, gone too. His chest burned. Sheldon's wife. But why Ania? He shook his head slowly, voice raw. Ania never had nothing to do with that. She didn't even like him. Why would she want to hurt her? The detective didn't answer, only closed the file. Jeremiah sank back into his chair, grief hollowing him out. His new life, the rehab, the work, the fragile sense of family felt like it had collapsed in a single night. And in the center of it all was Sheldon. The phone call came just after 9. Sheldon was in his study, the children sprawled in the den with their homework, Denise's absence explained by one of her vague church meetings. The voice on the other end was clipped, professional, a detective. The words landed one after the other, too fast and too final. Shooting, studio apartment, your wife, Denise Brown, self-inflicted gunshot, another victim, female, deceased. Name was Ania Johnson. Sheldon's throat closed. He managed to answer with the right formalities. Yes, he understood. Yes, he would come down to identify. But when the line went dead, he sank back in his chair, his hand trembling against the desk. Denise. Gone. He glanced toward the den, where Marcus bent over his math workbook, Alana humming under her breath as she colored. They didn't know. They couldn't know. Not yet. The house had to stay steady, at least for tonight. Sheldon pressed his palms to his face, the words repeating like a drumbeat. Denise. Self-inflicted. And Ania. His chest tightened, breath catching. Why her? What had she been dragged into? She had no stake in this. No reason to be tangled in his sins. But the answer hung unspoken, heavy and damning. Denise had gone looking for the truth, and she had found it. Sheldon stared at the family photos lining his desk, his children smiling wide at last summer's cookout, Denise beside him in her Sunday best. All of it was broken now, shattered by secrets he had thought he could contain. The children laughed softly in the other room, unaware that everything had changed. Sheldon straightened his tie with shaking hands. He couldn't tell them tonight. He couldn't take their mother away from them with a single sentence. Not yet. But as the house settled into uneasy silence, he sat alone in the study, one thought circling like a curse. Why Ania? Why her? Denise had known about him, about Jeremiah. But why had she gone after the girl? The question haunted them both. The answer came slowly, pieced together through fragments of the investigation. The private investigator, called back in for questioning, told them what he had overheard before the shot. Denise storming into the studio, accusing Ania of sleeping with Sheldon, her voice sharp, demanding a confession. Inyana denying, over and over, until Denise's anger turned reckless. Jeremiah sat across from the detective when he heard it spelled out, his hands trembling. She thought it was her? His voice broke. Ania never, she wasn't. He shoved his chair back, pressing his palms over his face. Sheldon heard the same story later, the details laid out in a quiet room. His stomach turned with every word. Denise had believed Ania was the affair, not Jeremiah. Ania had been the target of her fury, a stand-in for the betrayal Denise thought she had uncovered. The truth landed on both men with the same brutal weight. Ania died not for who she was, but for what she was mistaken to be. And there was no undoing it. The police tape was gone, but the air still carried the weight of it. Jeremiah unlocked the door to the studio with hands that shook, the metal scraping against the lock, as if even it resisted letting him back in. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The couch, where Ania used to sprawl with her books, sat empty. Her blanket folded neatly over the armrest, the way the officers had left it. The kitchenette counters gleamed unnaturally clean, stripped of her coffee mugs, her half-finished cereal boxes. It was as if someone had tried to erase her, but the room still whispered her name. Jeremiah dropped his keys on the table and sank into the silence. His eyes fell to the corner where her laughter used to fill the space, to the chair where she teased him about being a sugar baby, to the pillow where her braids had left faint imprints. He buried his face in his hands. Guilt clawed up his throat. If he hadn't let Sheldon into his life, if he hadn't asked for the studio, if he hadn't invited Ania to live with him, she would still be here. But she wasn't. And he was left with walls that felt colder now, rooms that echoed too loud with absence. Jeremiah stood and drifted into the kitchenette. His hand brushed the drawer where the knife had been pulled. His chest tightened, breath stuttering. He slammed it shut and stumbled back, pressing himself against the counter, fighting the wave of nausea. "This was supposed to be safe," he whispered to the empty room. "This was supposed to be ours." The studio no longer felt like home. It felt like a grave. He sat on the couch, pulled the blanket over his lap, and closed his eyes. It still smelled faintly of Ania's shampoo, coconut, and lavender. Jeremiah clutched it to his chest, letting the grief roll over him until exhaustion dragged him down. For the first time in months, he was alone again. By mid-morning, the story was everywhere. Talk radio, news tickers, the relentless feed of online articles recycling the same photograph of Sheldon and Denise at a charity gala, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling, polished, untouchable. Now, every word of the coverage dragged his life through the mud. Sheldon Brown, prominent civil rights attorney, is facing scrutiny today after investigators confirmed his late wife, Denise Brown, fatally shot 19-year-old Ania Johnson before turning the gun on herself. Cameras swarmed outside his office. Reporters shouted questions over each other. "Mr. Brown, were you aware of your wife's instability? Was Ms. Johnson involved with you personally? Did you know your wife was armed?" Sheldon stood in front of the reporters, flanked by colleagues, his jaw set tight. His statement was short, rehearsed, delivered in the same steady tone he used before juries. "My family is grieving. My children are grieving. Denise was a devoted wife and mother who struggled privately in ways we are still trying to understand. I ask that you respect our privacy in this time of mourning. I will not be answering further questions." Flashes erupted around him, cameras catching every expression on his face, every tight swallow. He turned and walked back inside, but the noise followed him, a roar that would not fade. Behind closed doors, in the silence of his office, he pressed his hands to his temples. Denise was gone. Ania was gone. Jeremiah's name hadn't surfaced in the press, not yet, but it was only a matter of time before someone asked why Denise had been at that studio apartment in the first place. Sheldon stared at the framed degrees on his wall, the polished glass reflecting a man he no longer recognized. He had fought his whole life for control, for order, for reputation. And now, the world knew his wife had killed a teenage girl and herself. No courtroom strategy could contain that. Jeremiah hadn't spoken to Sheldon in days, wanting to give him space to grieve his wife's death. The silence weighed on him, though, heavier with each passing night. Then, while he was on site at work, his phone buzzed. A new message lit up the screen. "We need to talk." It was from Sheldon. Jeremiah stood frozen, the hammer in his hand, suddenly heavy. He braced himself, knowing whatever waited on the other end of that message would change everything. The water at Cascade Springs moved steady as ever, pouring over the rocks in a shimmer of white foam. Evening sunlight spilled through the trees, painting the trail in muted gold. For Jeremiah, it felt almost cruel that the place still looked beautiful, untouched, when everything inside him was breaking. Sheldon was already there, sitting on the bench where they'd once shared quieter secrets. His shoulders slumped, suit jacket folded beside him, tie loosened as if he couldn't bear the usual precision anymore. Jeremiah sat down beside him, eyes on the water. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Jeremiah broke the silence. "How you holding up?" Sheldon exhaled through his nose, his hands laced tight in his lap. "The kids," he shook his head. "They're taking it pretty hard. I haven't told them everything, just that their mama was sick and couldn't fight anymore. But they feel it. They feel the hole." Jeremiah nodded, his throat thick. "I keep thinking about her and Ania. What happened that night?" He swallowed hard. "It's all my fault. If I hadn't asked you for more, if I hadn't gotten involved with a married man, none of this would have happened. I don't know what I was thinking." Sheldon turned toward him, his voice low, steady. "Don't put this all on yourself. It wasn't just you. I wanted it too. Every bit of it. I wanted you just as much as you wanted me." Jeremiah closed his eyes, shame and relief crashing together in his chest. The water roared on, merciless, as if the earth itself refused to soften the sound of their guilt. For the first time, neither of them tried to dress it up or excuse it. It was what it was, a choice they both made, and a choice they would carry together, whether it bound them or broke them. Sarah folded her hands across the Bible in her lap, rocking gently in the chair by the window. Jeremiah sat across from her, slouched on the couch, his boots leaving faint dust marks in the rug. "You look tired, baby," she said, her eyes searching his face. "Like the weight of the world's on your shoulders?" Jeremiah shrugged. "Work's been long, that's all." Sarah leaned forward, her voice soft but sharp. "Don't lie to your mama. I see it. Rehab cleaned your body, but it didn't fix what's in here." She pressed a hand to her chest. "That kind of healing don't come from 12 steps. It comes from God." Jeremiah shifted uncomfortably, staring at the floor. Memories of the church, of the deacon, of his mother once calling him a liar. All of it pressed down at once. "I'm trying, Mama," he muttered. "I'm working. I'm clean. I'm keeping my head down." Sarah shook her head. "That's good, but it ain't enough. Flesh is weak, Jeremiah. Temptation's waiting at the door every day. If you don't let the Lord hold you up, you'll fall right back down." Her words hit him harder than he wanted to admit. He thought of Ania's laughter echoing in the studio, of Sheldon's hands gripping his in the shower. He thought of the choices that had brought him here, the secrets he was still keeping. Jeremiah rubbed his palms over his face. "I don't know if I can go back to all that, Mama. Church, God, after everything." Sarah's tone softened, but her conviction didn't waver. "I don't care what happened before. God still sees you. And if you want to stay clean, if you want to stay alive, you're going to need him more than ever." Jeremiah didn't answer. The sound of his mother's rocking chair filled the silence. For the first time since leaving rehab, he felt the ground under his feet start to shake.